Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. This is the 15th session, and you would recall that we have studied the first 82 verses of Surah Baqarah, and prior to that, we had also finished discussing and reading Surah Fatiha. So, as far as Surah Baqarah is concerned, it has been pointed out that its main addressees are the Jews of the times of Prophet Muhammad, and they are being presented with a charge sheet of their crimes and their wrongdoings that they did in the times of Moses in particular, and how at various instances they continued to breach their covenant with God regarding honoring the last prophet and some of the other promises that were took from them. And each time, sometimes after some punishment, sometimes by merely through repentance, they were forgiven. And as a result, they continued. I mean, instead of being grateful to God for their forgiveness and for the fact that they are still being allowed to continue in the status of being witnesses to the religion of truth before other people of the world, they floundered this responsibility. And as a result, we will see near the middle of this surah that their responsibility of bearing witness has been taken away. They have been deposed from this position, and a new ummah was instituted in those times in their place. So, just to reconnect, we have been discussing this, that as far as prophethood is concerned, as far as guidance from God is concerned, God made this decision, and apparently it seems from the Quran, that after Prophet Abraham, guidance through prophets would be provided through his progeny, and they were given this responsibility. Before Abraham, or the pre-Abrahamic scenario, was that individual prophets were sent to various communities, and apparently it does seem that that was a time when when population was not much and people were confined to various territories, and this is something that prompted individual prophets. But once Abraham was deputed for this task, and especially in his own capacity as a mighty messenger of God, later on, all guidance through prophets of God was confined to his progeny. So first, the Israelites, or the branch which is descended from Prophet Isaac, were given this responsibility. And this Surah Baqarah actually is basically concerned with how this responsibility was given to them in various phases of time. They continued to breach their covenants, they continue to show slackness in fulfilling the responsibility, and in particular, their attitude regarding the advent of the last prophet, about which their own books spoke very clearly. When he came, they were the first people to deny. They were expected to be the first people to welcome him because they had found his mention in their own books. So we will continue with this charge sheet once again by beginning with Surah verse 83. And you will often see the word Misak being repeated in this Surah Baqarah at various instances. So the word Misak, which means a covenant or a promise, again, this is something which shows on their part that they made commitments with the Almighty, they promised to follow whatever was agreed upon, and then they actually turned away and they breached this promise. So starting off with the verses 83, and I will continue up to verse 86 in translation, and after that we will discuss the issues that have been discussed in these 3 or 4 verses. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa iz akhazna misakakum la tasfikuna dima'akum wa la tukhrijuna anfusakum min diyarikum thumma aqrartum wa antum tashhadun. I'm just going to read the translation parallel to the verses so that you remain connected to the text. And recall when we took a promise from you. Of course, the word you referring to the Israelites. So I have been explaining this, that the style of the Quran, or the genre of the Quran is such that it is a book in which dialogue has been embedded in narration, and this dialogue is often very subtle at times, and at times you are clearly able to distinguish the speaker and the addressee. And as you will see that since verse 40, when the Israelites were directly addressed, the address will continue with them until the middle of the surah. But prior to verse 40, we had noted this down, that the first 39 verses of Surah Baqarah, they form an introduction. They are like a prelude to the actual addressees, and in that part we found that the Prophet was also addressed and assured, and the people of the book living in Medina, they were also addressed. So now for a very long period of times, from verse 40 right up to the middle of the surah, you will find the Jews of the Prophet's times being addressed repeatedly, and this pronoun kum, as you can see, will be repeated time after time, and you'll see that basically the addressees are the Israelites, and they are being told how their forefathers continued to flounder and breach this promise. So the first thing that is mentioned is that, and recall when we took a promise from you, you shall not shed your kinsmen's blood and nor turn them out of their dwellings. Then you consented, and you are its witnesses. So this is something which once again they were guilty of, that they would not shed the blood of their own allies and their own tribes, and they would not turn them out of their dwellings. But as you can see, that this never happened. The Quran says, Summa aqrartum, that you accepted this, wa antum tashhadun, that you are the people who were a witness to this acceptance, but you are the people that floundered, as you can see, is being told to them in the next verse. So it says, Summa antum ha'ula'i taqtuluna anfusakum wa tukhrijuna fariqam minkum min diyarihim tazaharuna alayhim bil ithmi wal udwan wa iyyatukum usara tufaduhum wa huwa muharramun alaykum ikhrajuhum afatu'minuna bi ba'dil kitab wa takfuruna bi ba'd فما جزاء من يفعل ذلك منكم إلا خزي في الدنيا إلا خزي في الحياة الدنيا. So just let me complete the translation up till now. It says, then you are the very ones who slay your own kinsfolk and drive out a group of yours from their dwellings, such that you help one another against them with oppression and usurpation. And if they come to you as captives, you set them free after taking ransom, even though their expulsion was unlawful for you in the first place. Then do you not believe in one part of the book and deny another? So those of you who do this shall be punished with nothing but disgrace in this world. So as you can see, that this part is describing the fact that the covenant which was struck with them was the fact that they will honor the covenant which was made, and that they would not shed blood of their kinsmen. But what happened was that they absolutely went back on their words, and instead of not shedding blood, what they would do is they would, as the verse says, تَقْتُلُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَتُخْرِجُونَ فَرِيقًا مِنْكُمْ, that you would kill your allies, and then they would be expelled from your land, and then they would come back to you as prisoners, as it says. تخرجون فريقا منكم من ديارهم تظاهرون عليهم بالإثم والعدوان. And then when they would come to you as prisoners, إياتكم أسارى تفادوهم, you would pay ransom. You would free them after taking ransom, even though their expulsion was unlawful for you. So it's basically a part of their history in which they had these covenants with various tribes, and they had made this promise that they will make peace with these tribes and they will not shed blood. But then this has happened, and you'll find reference to this in the Old Testament. So the Quran says that when this is the situation, that you profess faith in part of this book and you actually deny the other part, which of course is referring to the fact that you were the people who were supposed to obey, as has been taken and seriously being informed to them time after time, but they did not accept this. They would accept one part, which would mean they would make that promise, but when the time came to fulfill that promise, they would end up breaking that promise. So the Quran says that when this is something that you do, this is something that you do, then this will be disgraceful for you in this world. And وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. On the day of judgment, you shall be consigned to an even graver conflict, even graver torment. And وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. You always do this, and whatever you do, God is not unaware of it. So this completes this first offense that has been mentioned in these two verses. And then it says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ اشْتَرَوُا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا بِالْآخِرَةِ فَلَا يُخَفَّفُ عَنْهُمُ الْعَذَابُ وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. It is these people who, in exchange of the hereafter, have bought the life of this world. So now neither their punishment shall be eased, nor shall they be helped. So this is something that has been explained to them, that as far as individuals are concerned, as far as people are concerned, they make these promises and they continue to break these promises. And the important thing that you'll see, which is mentioned here, is that as far as humankind is concerned, as far as people are concerned who would be regarded as people who should be the first ones to be honoring God's covenant, they ended up not honoring God's covenant. And I do feel that there is one verse which has been actually left out. That is, I'm just going to repeat that verse. That actually there was the first slide which I missed out. So I'm just going to add that first slide to this whole topic. So it starts actually with verse 83. We missed verse 83 and we went on to 84 and 85. So I'm just going to go back to verse 83. So the Misaq, or the covenant that was taken from them, is mentioned here, and with this begins that new chapter of that commitment that they had made. So وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِّنكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And recall when we took a promise from the Israelites. What was that promise? You shall worship none but God, show kindness to your parents, to your kinsfolk, to orphans, to the destitute, and took a promise to say what is good to people diligently, attend to the prayer and pay the zakah. Then except for a few of all you broke it, and in reality you are those who break promises. So this, as I said, is the starting point of these verses, in which again the Misaq is mentioned, and this Misaq or this covenant, this is something which is repeated time and time again, that they will worship one God. They will not be in any way idolatrous, which of course we know that they were in their heinous and horrific crime of that calf worship. Not only that, we know that from history and from the Quran itself, that they himself had asked that Moses, please create for us some deity. And when they would be traveling and when they would be encountering other polytheistic nations, they would be so enamored and influenced by them that they would ask Moses to create something similar to them. So this is what has started off this flight of promises from the Almighty, and says, remember, you had said that you will not worship anyone but God himself. But this is something that you did not know. And not only that, some other directives were given, and that they are وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And you'll see that these directives are repeated in the Quran several times for other addresses as well. And as such, it does seem that the Israelites were on the weaker side. They were not following this part as well, regarding their behavior with the destitute, their behavior with the kinsfolk, their behavior with their own parents. And then something very, very prominent was said, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. You have to speak with people in a way that is good, that is right. This is exactly the same what the Quran has said in some of the other instances, when it says وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. It says that يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. You speak straight and the truth. Don't mince words. Be direct. tell what the truth is. So the very first covenant which is mentioned here, you can see, is a covenant which was taken for them regarding worshipping one God, regarding, and you can also see what is specifically mentioned here, besides being good to people around them who are in a state of bother or they are destitute. And the Quran has also told them that you must be diligent in the prayer and pay zakat, which shows that the prayer and the zakat was a pre-Quranic practice. It preceded the Quran. And as far as the prayer was concerned, its history began actually with Adam himself, and it has been mentioned at various instances in the Quran that prayer and zakah, they are rituals that have existed ever since the prophets started to come. So once again, we see that they were made to realize that this is something that you have to do. And then in Surah Maryam, at one instance, the Almighty has said, Azar Salah, that these are the people who had wasted the prayer. They wasted the prayer, which means that actually parts of the prayer which were meant to be followed and described and at the same time carried out with a lot of humility, that is something which they just they forsook. And we know that as far as kneeling and prostration is concerned, it now is seldom the part of any Jewish prayer. And so this is what the blame of the Quran is, that you were required to establish and be diligent in the same prayer, in the same manner. But again, this is something that you did not do. This second promise, of course, is something that we have already discussed when we just started this lesson, that they would be people who would pledge a whole group of their forefathers and would present with Moses. So it does seem that it is evident, and from the Torah specifically, that it was the way of Moses that he would inform the Israelites of the directives of God in public. So you see that the words which are used are, and they clearly say that then you consented and you are its witnesses. You consented and you are its witnesses, which means that whatever Moses revealed to them, he revealed in public. And they became people who actually accepted whatever Moses told them in public, and they were his witnesses. And this shows that whenever the Torah would be revealed, or a part of the Torah would be revealed, Moses would go out to them and recite it out to them and make them realize that this is the new part of, or the new installment of the Torah that has been revealed to them. So now, before we go on to the next part, if you have any questions regarding these 3 or 4 verses, please raise them now.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. My question is on translation. So in verse 83, where it says, "Antum wa antum muridun." So literally it means, and you refuse. But your translation is, you're the ones who refuse. And then likewise, verse 85, where it ends, where it says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ, which is not unaware of what you do. But you had a reference that you always do it. So somehow, the translation feels a bit more condemning than the text. So if you could comment on that.
What you're saying that the translation is more, it's more harsh? Is that what you said?
It's harsher.
Well, remember, the translation itself is a translation of Ustaz Ghamidi's Al-Bayan, and the وَأَنْتُمْ مُوْرِضُونَ, the reason that it appears harsh is because of the fact that the word mu'ridun appears as an adjective. So it's not said that it was an instance of you showing inversion. For that, a verb should have been used. So you see what a verb does, it expresses one instance of whatever the verb says. If I had used the word, or the Quran had used the word i'raz, ya'rizun, for example, or yurizun, which means that you are people who evade, and the whole evasion would have been mentioned in the form of a verb, that would be a simple translation. That as in your terms, it would not have been harsh. But because an adjective has been used, which means that it has now become a habit. Now you are people who are continuously taken up this job of aversion. And the word morizun is not just, it does not say that you are averse. It says that it has become a habit for you. It has now become an attribute because it's an adjective. So that is why you find that the word morizun has been used in the translation, so that to reflect the fact that they had become embodiments of evasion.
And verse 85.
Yes, وَمَاللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ أَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ, translated as God is not unaware of it. So
No,
that's
but
a simple
before that,
translation.
where it says, you always do this. I believe that's what the translation said.
Let me see. Can you point out the exact place?
It was towards the end of 85. If you put up the slide, maybe I can help.
You always do this. Is that the... Okay, so this is... yes, that is a very good question that you have asked. You see, what has happened is that وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. So, this is something which is like a continuous thing that has happened with them, that they continue to break promises. They continue to make promises and they continue to break them. So you see, this verse occurs after a series of these breaches. Prior to verse 85 and 84 as well, you'll find again a covenant being taken from them, and then again they floundered that, they violated that covenant. And so therefore, in order to bring out the stress of the fact that God is not unaware of what you do, this emphasis has been added that, God would have forgiven you. God knows that, this is something that you have been doing all the time. So therefore, this is like a perpetual practice that you have adopted. So basically, in order to connect to the fact that this is a sequence of breaches that God is not unaware of, and God is aware of all these breaches, at times they would make this breach and they would, adopt subterfuges. So like they would like to fulfill the law and violate the spirit. And at other times they would end up totally, refusing to obey. So it's like this series of directives which ends on this verse that God is not unaware of you do. So this is something that you continue to do, and don't think that God is unaware of what you have been continuing to do, because you see, this is not something of a one-time happening. It's like a continuous attitude that they have adopted.
Isn't that, isn't that already apparent in the text, in the right level of intensity?
Yes, of course. That is why, right. That is why at times something which is apparent in the text, if it is expressed, then the stress and emphasis in the text, which is, found in the Arabic, is conveyed to the English reader as well. So without this thing being added, it would have been a simple expression of the fact that God knows what you are doing. It would just have been a simple expression. But when you add this thing that you are people who are prone to breaking your promises, and when you break these promises, don't think that God is not unaware of them. God is always aware of these promises, whether you do them openly or secretly or by adopting various subterfuges.
Okay, I understand your position. Thanks.
Thank you. Imran, you may go ahead now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much again for explaining these verses. I'm not sure about the verse 85. If you're going to do a little tafsir, because I know you did the translations, but you stopped at 84. The first two lines, where it starts, ثم أنتم هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم وتخرجون فريقا منهم من ديارهم. Then you are the ones that you're killing one another and forcing people out of your homes or their homes, and then cooperating against them in sin and aggression. And so I don't know the background, so I wanted to ask about what the background is. And then it says, and if they come to you as captives, you ransom them, although their eviction was forbidden to you. So the wordly translation one can do, but I just wanted to see if you can shed some light on the context and the background of this.
So this is something which it happened with their allies, and they would make peace with their allies, and when they would have their own personal interest being dented in any way, they would not openly break the contract with their allies. What they would do is that they would, start some war in a way that would be justified. And when that war would rage, would be ignited, of course, people would be taken prisoners or they would be slain. So what they would do is, as if they're showing a favor, when people who themselves they were not required to even expel, when they attacked and had made them expel, when they would be taken as captives, and they would, of course, captives would come back to them. So they would show this favor, as if they are doing something very generous, that they would take ransom and have them released. So it's basically something that they did for their own interest. They would break that promise, and when something would be, the consequence would be, of course, war. And that war, of course, in most cases, they would win that war. And what would happen in that war would be that the same people who were their allies would now come to them as captives. And then they would show this favor to them. Well, okay, we are so generous, and they would set them free. Again, this is something which has happened in their history, in which you'll find a part of their history being described in the Torah, in which this is what they did when they came out of Egypt, and when they were in the desert, and they were moving along, and they were, of course, encountering various tribes, and those tribes with them, they would make a covenant of no war. But whenever their own interests would be dented, they would break that covenant, and then, instead of being ashamed, what they would do is that when people would come to them as captives, they would just set them free, but they would have already achieved their purpose, of course.
Yeah, and they would benefit from like you said, the ransom as well.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
almost like, they weren't supposed to fish during Sabbath, but they
Right,
would
exactly
let the
the
fish
same
come
thing.
in and do it rest of the week.
So you see, the ending part of the verse is أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ. Exactly this comment is being made, that you believe in one part of the book and you do not believe in the other part, you deny it. Actually, it was not at all allowed to you to have that war waged against them and to have them killed. So you denied this part and you accepted the other part, in which the allies were to be made peace with. And this is something, you did something which was outwardly as if they would be trying to justify something that they had done wrong inwardly. So it's a continuous historical narration of events in which they made a promise and then they ended up breaking it. And also note this word misak. If you start counting the number of times it has been used since verse 40, which is the verse from which this surah has actually begun addressing them, you'll see how that misak, and the way that this misak would be done, or this covenant would be done, as I said, would be that Moses would communicate this to them in an open gathering, and they would say, okay, we agree to this covenant. So this has been mentioned elsewhere in the Quran and also in the Torah, that this covenant would be presented before the collectivity by Moses, and they would say yes, and then they would go back on these words. So that is why the Quran has also used these words, وَأَنْتُمْ تَشْهَدُونَ, that you were yourselves present, you were yourself witnesses to this covenant. It's not that Moses made this covenant personally with God. He brought God's covenant to you, and you agreed to it, and then you broke it.
So aren't they supposed to be led by the prophet of the time on their excursions and on their battles, or they would just go on their own in opposition to their prophet?
So you see, it's not that the Israelites, they were always doing this in front of the prophets. There were times in which, although we find between Moses and Jesus prophets coming continuously, but then there were areas in which, they were not always together with the prophet, and they had their own independence as well. So this they would do. And if you read Bible, you'll find out that all the prophets which came between Moses and Jesus, a lot of them came. They would continue to rebuke them for this, because they would exceed the bounds, they would exceed the covenant which was made by the prophet, but then on their own they would break it. So it was not always that they did this in the leadership of the prophet. They would do it on their own as well. This is what it seems from these words as well.
Thank you. Nashad Shafqat, you may ask your question now.
Yes, Dr. Sab, just a small clarification. You said that Moses brought the covenant in front of all his people, and they all agreed to it. I think there is a mention somewhere in Ghamidi Saab's commentary that he brought it to the leaders of the 12 tribes, and they passed on to the people, because it would be physically impossible almost.
Of course, that is how it happened. So you see, yeah, at times the leaders would be present, and at times the leaders would be present in the presence of their tribes as well. I mean, it was not that all of the people would be present. The representatives or the leaders would be there, and so at times they would be there alone. They would be like standing in front. But then at times it does seem from the Quran as well that whole collectivity was there, and although it was being received and heard by the leaders who would be standing in front, it was virtually as if the rest had also acknowledged it.
Thank you very much.
Mubashir, you may go ahead now.
Thank you very much. Dr. I have a couple of questions. One of them has already been asked and addressed. First of all, I have a question regarding the pre-Abrahamic and post-Abrahamic Sunnah of prophethood. We see that in case of individual Rasuls, we do not see, barring a couple of weakness, in general, the God always praises the prophets. But when it comes to Israelites, despite God's claims that I have chosen them on the basis of my knowledge, but then there are always comments like these illa qalilan ma ta'malun and antum murizun. So why is that? Was there something in selection, something vary, or Quran just describes their charge sheet?
So here is basically the charge sheet which is being described. So remember the covenant that when the Almighty says that وَلَقَدْ اخْتَرْنَاهُمْ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ, that we chose them out of our own knowledge, that we would give this responsibility to them. So when God says that it was out of His own knowledge, it means that according to the plan that He had laid out for mankind. So it is, the word knowledge actually reflects that plan. And that plan was that He would select one part of Abraham's progeny first and the other part after that. So basically, when God says that I did this out of my own knowledge, it refers to the plan that He has chalked out, which is evident on the Quran. But obviously, the nature of this knowledge was not that He's going to select people who are going to be righteous. So it's basically the fact that they are given this responsibility as a trial, as a test. And then the verses that you have mentioned, after that, like saying that Qalilam minkum or illa murizun, that most of you turned out to be people who obeyed, is the result of that trial. So God made a plan to give them this responsibility, which is reflected by His ilm. And it was up to them now to honor that plan. But instead of honoring it, on most occasions, they dishonored it. So you need to relate the two together.
I'm sorry, but I find that the same words are used for choosing Bani Israel and the prophets, Istafa and something. But in case of prophets, it's not trial, it's responsibility with the backing of God.
You see, it's a responsibility in both cases. It's just a question of changing the word. When the istafa word is used, like in Allah astafa Adama wa Nuhan, wa ala Imrana ala al-alamin. So the istafa here is that earlier on individuals were chosen for the position of prophethood, and later on, other people were chosen for this fact. And you can see that this evasion was found in previous prophets as well. Look at what happened to Noah. Very few people accepted faith in him, and the very few of them boarded the ark. So it's not just the Israelites who are guilty of denying their prophets. Earlier on also, if you look at history, a very greater part of the people, of the followers of a prophet, they denied the prophet. And these earthquakes and storms, they destroyed. Look at what happened to Ad, look at what happened to Samud, look at what happened to the people of Lot. So you see, it is the same thing that happened with them as well. So the word istafa only means that God chose or gave His plan that they will be, they would be given this job. But then it was their doing that they did not earn whatever they had to earn. So it was the same regarding the previous prophets. They were given this choice, they were chosen, but they ended up being destroyed. So they were totally routed. The people of Ad, Samud, Lot, Shuaib, the Quran says that none of them remained. So it is no different from them.
Sorry, I do not find an analogy between Israelites and people of Nuh. They were not chosen, they were just sent a prophet. Let me explain this in one sentence.
Okay.
In case of individuals, the choice was perfect for the prophethood. But in case of a group of people, Quran itself says that they were not of worthy.
They were not?
They could not come up to the mark.
No, I've cited this basic verse. You need to comment on that verse. It says, "Inna Allah hastafa Adama wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahima wa ala Imran al alameen." So this one single verse, the first two parts, they reflect the fact that single individuals were chosen. So Noah and Adam were single individuals. And the second part says, Ala Ibrahim wa ala Imran, which of course are the Banu Abraham. So the same istafa is used for a single prophet being chosen, and the same word istafa is used for the Israelites. So I don't find any difference in that istafa. Istafa is just referring to the responsibility. And in both cases, this responsibility was heavily, it never happened. So the followers of Noah, we know what happened to them. Most, including his son, they were destroyed. Similarly, in the case of the Israelites, I would say this tale of accepting and then rejecting has continued in the Quran. So, the word istafa is common to both.
I take it as a food for further thought.
Okay.
Let me ask the last question. When
Okay.
it says the taqtuluna anfusakum, here it is, do not kill your kinsfolk. But at some places, anfusab means yourself. So how do we
Like, for
make
example,
that difference?
Where does it say your own selves?
La tazlimuna anfusakum, do not do injustice to yourself.
No, that is another thing. Taqtuluna anfusakum, when the word anfusakum is used like this, whenever you use the word qatl, it never refers to suicide. It doesn't refer to the fact that you are going to kill your own self. So in Arabic language, when this word is used with anfusakum, it refers to the fact that amongst your own selves. So the translation would be that you killed people from amongst your own selves. For this purpose, the word anfusakum is used as well. So like tazlimuna anfusakum would of course mean that you wronged your own souls. And of course the word tazlimuna is also used for other people. Zalimun li nafsihi is also used, and zalimun li ghayrihi is also used. But when you use this verb taqtuluna anfusakum, yes, in some contexts it does mean killing your own self. But when the Quran is using this, it's here, and you can see that this word has been used elsewhere as well. When Moses commanded people to kill perpetrators of those who had worshipped the calf, at that instance also it says taqtuluna anfusakum. So it would not mean that you kill your own selves, because the people who were killing, they were not guilty of calf worship. People who were guilty of calf worship were the ones about whom it was said that you kill them. So qatala anfusakum has both connotations, to kill your own self and also to kill people who are amongst your own selves.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Annie, you may go ahead.
Thank you. So on verse 85, in some exegesis, there's a reference that this verse refers to Aus versus Khazraj, where Renuka tribe allied with the Khazraj, and the other two tribes allied with Aus, which implies that verse 85 is addressed to Jews of Medina and not Jews in general. So if you could comment on that.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. So you see, this, as I said, that this is something that they did. And remember, the Jews of Medina were not just Jews of Medina in the times of the Prophet. This is a situation which is being described before the advent of the Prophet. So it's like their own history being recounted to them, what they did in the land of Arabia as well. So you must have read Ibn Kathir maybe, or some other exegetes who have explained, I mean they have explained that who these allies were and who the tribes were. So the tribes and the allies are explained that they would do so, I mean they would kill in spite of the covenant that they were made with them, and then of course they would also take ransom and have them released. So yes, this is a part of their own history, but history in Medina itself before the advent of the Prophet.
So this is not, Jews at large. This is Jews in Medina.
Yeah, in Jews, of course, it was there. It happened in Arabia. This part of the history, or this part of the violation of the covenant is related not to any place else but to Arabia itself, and that too in Medina.
Thank you. We have just one more question, Dr. Shehzad. Should I go ahead with it?
Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah. Mr. Imran, please go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Shehzad, just commenting on the last question, with Asbab al-Nuzul, and especially with Maulana Farahi's thoughts, that even though a verse might be referred to have been revealed regarding one incident, it is not restricted to that incident. It can, like you were mentioning, can be applied to other incidents, which is the history of the Jews. Just like that time where, of course, some incidents happen in the life of the Sahaba, and, they used to call, like, you're like the back of my mother, like Zahar, but that was something the Prophet was teaching that the Arabs used to do even before. And so he was teaching a lesson, and it came at that time, but it was applied in general, even can be applied on other occasions.
Yes, but actually this part of their history, I mean, it has a very specific connotation. It's not that this happened all the time, that they had made allies. So this part of their history is very specific, and this is the part in which, when they had arrived in Medina and they had made these adjustments and these agreements so that they would live in peace. So remember, in Arabia, war was strife-ridden, it was war-stricken, and in order to attain that peace, they had did this. So I mean, this particular verse has a very specific connotation. Although, as I said, I mean, this history is not mentioned in the Quran itself, but because of the fact that people to whom these verses were narrated, I mean, it was as if they knew what was going on, because it was their own history. So, I mean, some of the things can be generalized, but if you look at the events that have been traced from verse 40 onwards, I mean, start with verse 40 where the Israelites are addressed directly. Each of the incidents of Misak, which is mentioned, all of them have a very specific connotation, and they just cannot be generalized. I mean, you just cannot say that this covenant was taken from them, and every other covenant which had a similar situation was also applicable here.
I see. So we cannot apply this to the other
we
Jews
cannot.
in the Middle East.
We cannot, because you see, this is something which never happened for them. So you see, remember the charge sheet which is being presented is the charge sheet to the Jews of Medina. This surah is referring to them. So at times the charge sheet is what they did themselves, and at times it relates to their forefathers, which they did very earlier on, when they had not inhabited the land of Medina, when they were still in the desert, when they were still, I mean, look at the fact that the Quran speaks of man and salwa. It speaks of the fact that they had come out of Egypt and they wanted the same things that they had in Egypt. So the context itself tells us that at times the Jews in general are being addressed, and at times they are specifically addressed, I mean, of a particular area. Sorry, so we need to redo. We have skipped verse 86. It says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ اشْتَرَوُا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا بِالْآخِرَةِ فَلَا يُخَفَّفُ عَنْهُمُ الْعَذَابُ وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. The verse is self-explanatory. It says that it is these people who in exchange of the hereafter have bought the life of this world. So now neither their punishment shall be eased, nor shall they be helped. So once again, I mean, once the crime has been mentioned, as is the case with the Quran, the retribution of the crime or the consequence of the crime is mentioned, and this is precisely what has happened in verse 86. So now moving on to verse 87 and 88. So it says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَقَفَّيْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ بِالرُّسُلِ وآتينا عيسى ابن مريم البينات وأيدناه بروح القدس أفكلما جاءكم رسول بما لا تهوى أنفسكم استكبرتم ففريقا كذبتم وفريقا تقتلون وقالوا قلوبنا غلف بل لعنهم الله بكفرهم فقليلا ما يؤمنون. And to Moses we had given the book and had sent them and sent him our messengers. So one after the other. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَقَفَّيْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ الرُّسُلِ, and sent after him. So Moses was given the book, but right after him, one after the other, without any break, other messengers came, and at the very end gave Jesus, son of Mary, very clear signs and strengthened him with the Holy Spirit. Then do you know what your attitude was with those signs? So all this will happen. So will this happen, that whenever a messenger of ours brings to you what does not suit your desires, you will always be arrogant before him? Then you will reject one group and slay the other? And these are the people that they said, our hearts have covers. Kulubuna wolf. No, in fact, God has cursed them for this disbelief of theirs. So now they shall seldom believe. So now let us see some parts of their what has been said in this section. So the first thing that has to be understood here is the word Rusul. Summa qaffayna min ba'dihim bir Rusul. So the word Rusul is not always used in the context of a messenger. I mean, the word Rasul is also I would say a term technically which means a cadre which is above the prophet. And for the Rasul, we know that the Quran says that after Itmamul Hujjah, or conclusive communication of the truth, retribution for their foremost addressees is destined. But for the prophets, this is not the case. So remember, we have already discussed this difference in the cadre of a Nabi and a Rasul. But another thing that is important is that at times the word Rasul is not used in its term as a term. It's just used as a common Arabic word in the form of an envoy. So remember, we have been discussing this fact that as far as the Rasuls of God are concerned, when they are doing their mission, they cannot be killed. I mean, they cannot be put to death, because in that case, the mission of God would be left unfulfilled. But here the word Rasul says, Fariqan Taktulun. I mean, you would kill one of the group of the messengers and the others you would not. For Fariqan Kazzabtum wa Fariqan Taktulun. So one of the group you would deny and the other you would kill. So the question arises that how can Rasul be killed when they are, doing their job? So it has to be understood here that at not all occasions is the word Rasul used in the terminological sense, referring to the people, referring to a cadre which is higher than prophets. It's used simply as a non-term in Arabic language, meaning envoys of God, meaning people who are sent by God. So this is something that has to be noted. And then if you can see that one important thing is mentioned here is that we gave Jesus, son of Mary, very clear signs. And then it says, and strengthen him. The words which are used are وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ, that we strengthen him with the Spirit. Now the reason that the help of Gabriel for Prophet Muhammad is, Prophet Jesus in fact is mentioned in various places in the Quran, is that the Jews, because of their wretchedness, believed that the various miracles which had emanated from the hands of Jesus were because of the fact that the help was being provided by Beelzebub, who was the king of spirits. So this is why the Quran has negated this whole concept. It's not Beelzebub who's an evil spirit. It is not he who is helping Jesus in any way. The Quran continues to say this, Ayyadnahu bi Ruhul Qudus. You'll find this Ayyadnahu bi Ruhul Qudus, this expression repeated on several occasions in the Quran, negating the fact that the Ruhul Qudus or Gabriel was the one who was strengthening or being of support to Jesus, and not Beelzebub, who's spelled as Baal as Bul in the Torah. So let me just read out this part of the Torah in which this expression is mentioned. And in fact, it is not the Torah. It is the Injil, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, verses 22 to 28, telling us. It tells us that Prophet Jesus, whenever he would do some miracle, it was not because of God's help, but it was because of the demons or the chief demon who was called Beelzebub. So it is said that then they brought him a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute, and Jesus healed him so that he could both talk and see. All the people were astonished and said, Could this be the son of David? But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, It is only by Beelzebub, the prince of the demons, that this fellow drives out demons. So you see how the Torah, how the Injil says that if Jesus has worked miracles or he's done something, he cures the blind and the mute, then this is because of the fact that he is being helped by the evil spirit. So the point that I'm making here is that the Quran continuously refers to the New and the Old Testament without actually at times naming it. And the reason I'm saying is because of the fact that, one would ask that why is it that the Quran continues to say that we helped Jesus by the Ruhul Qudus? وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. There's no need to say that because we know that this is how it always happens in the case of prophets of God. This was specially said of Jesus because of this belief of the Pharisees that he would work these miracles not because of God's help, but because of help from the chief of the demons who was called Beelzebub. So this is something that we have to understand as far as this expression is concerned, that why is it that the Quran continues to say Ar-Ruhul Qudus. And I have already explained that the word Ar-Ruhul Qudus is something which is the title of Gabriel himself. And also what is important is that what Prophet Muhammad is presenting before them is certainly not what they claim. He is presenting something very sensible, but because of their own stubbornness and obduracy, they have been deprived of the ability to accept what is being told to them. So you see, the part of the Quran which we just discussed, the Jews would say, وَقُلُوبُنَا غُلْف, that our hearts have covers. We just cannot, we are not able to understand whatever you say. And they would say this derisively. They would say it in a mocking way. And the reason that the Quran has said this, it says that بَلْ لَعْنَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِكُفْرِهِمْ فَقَلِيلًا مَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. It is not because of the fact that your hearts have covers because of anything else, except the fact that it's like a punishment that now your hearts see nothing. Because of the fact they have continued to deny the guidance that was provided to them innately and by God himself. The result is now God has sealed their hearts. So kulubuna ghulf is exactly the same as God setting a seal on their hearts. Or instead of being ashamed of them, they would proudly say that we have covers. We just cannot listen to you. And then the Almighty remarks, بَلْ لَعْنَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِكُفْرِهِمْ. This is something that you do because of your disbelief. So now let us move on to the next part. It says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ كِتَابٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. If these Arabic words are understood directly per se, it's just seen that here God is extremely angry and he's really in a rage, in a fury. And the reason, of course, is something again that has to be understood, that God's emotions, they on a larger scale reflect our own emotions for people who continue to go back on their words, who continue to be given a chance to come back, and then they would say, okay, we'll accept what we have done, we were wrong, but once again, whenever the chance would come, they would again flounder that chance. So this anger that you see, which is exuding from these verses, is something which is very natural. It says that the words are فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Let me just first read the translation. It says, and these people are the ones that when a book from God came to them in confirmation of the predictions that they have with them, and before this they had been praying for the victory with reference to this book against those who had rejected their religion, then when they came to them, which they fully recognized, they rejected it. So God's curse is upon these rejectors. So you can clearly see that this curse of God is because of the fact that they had intentionally denied. And the Quran says, Ja'ahum ma arafu. Ja'ahum ma arafu kafru bihi. Which means that when that book came to them, which they recognized that this is the book of God, that they have been waiting for that book. I mean, obvious consequence would have been, or the obvious outcome should have been, that they should have believed in it. But what happened? The Quran says, kafru bihi. They knew that this is the book of God, and they said, we're not going to believe it. So this also is a very object lesson for all of us who are students of the Quran, that wherever you see this harshness in the Quran, this very strong expression of anger on the part of the Almighty, it is not uncalled for. It is something which is absolutely spot on. And you are waiting for something. When that thing arrives, you recognize that, yes, this is the thing I was waiting for. But then, as the Quran says, they recognized the book of God, but then they rejected it. Which means that their rejection was deliberate. It was intentional. It was not because of any confusion. It was not because of any ignorance. It was not because of any misinformation. It was because of their own arrogance that they accepted something and then they said nothing doing. So make note of this important fact, that the harshness of the Almighty is regarding such an unbecoming attitude. And then these words of wrath and fury and rage, they continue. بِئْسَ مَا اشْتَرَوْا بِهِ أَنفُسَهُمْ أَنْ يَكْفُرُوا بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بَغْيًا أَنْ يُنَزِّلَ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ فَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ عَلَى غَضَبٍ وَلِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Which means, what an evil thing is for which they have sold away themselves, that in mere stubbornness that God reveals His bounty to whomsoever He chooses from among His servants, they deny what God has sent down. So they earn God's wrath upon wrath, and now an ignominious punishment waits for them in this world and in the hereafter. You see, now the Quran actually makes it clear why this anger is directed towards the Jews in this way. It says that they were people who had denied out of arrogance. And the Quran says, "Ishtaru bihi anfusahum an yakfuru bima anzalallahu baghyan." Baghi in Arabic means rebellion. I mean, just to rebel, to show the fact that come what may, I understand, but I'm not going to give any credence of belief to it. So this is why the wrath of God is so evident. You'll find this in Surah Baqarah, you'll find this in Surah Al-Imran, and you'll find it in many other surahs in which this conclusive manner of communication is taking place, that it's not something ordinary. It's not something that people are discussing and there's any confusion. The Quran says, Arafu, they recognized it. They knew what it is, and then they ended up denying it. And that earned them the wrath of God. So something that has to be also understood here is that as far as the Quran is concerned, in this case you'll find the expression wrath upon wrath. فَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ عَلَى غَضَبٍ. Now this expression refers to the fact that when they had first broken the covenant with God and had pleasure with Moses, they had already earned the wrath of God. And now with the advent of Prophet Muhammad, they repeated it. So remember, the verse says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ عِندِ اللَّهِ. First it was Moses with whom they misbehaved, and they continued to do so. And then when this prophet arrived with the book they knew very well is the book that they were waiting for, they denied it once again. So they earned the double wrath of God, one after the other. And that is why the Quran says, فَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ عَلَى غَضَبٍ وَلِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Okay, if there are questions regarding this part, please raise them, and otherwise we'll go on to the next part.
So the reason that you explained that those people believe that Beelzebul is the prince of demons that would cast a demon out and heal the people. So
Right.
First question, part of the question is why it even occurred to them that this devil actually cast demons out. That's number one. And is this the reason why Quran, because every prophet was sent Ruhul Qudus, which is Jibreel, was sent to every prophet. But Quran precisely mentions it in cases of Jesus repeatedly, that we aided him with Ruhul Qudus. So thank you if you can shed light on that.
So you see, this is a very good question. The reason that the Quran specifically mentions it with Jesus repeatedly was because of the nature of miracles which Jesus worked. I mean, raising the dead to life is something which is an absolutely out of the ordinary. It's a big change in physical laws, and the Jews could not deny it. I mean, they could not deny it because they saw a person dead and they saw him being raised to life. So they had to belittle this effort of Moses. They had to somehow condemn it. They had to somehow relegate it to some other explanation. And the explanation that they gave was that this is not from God that he's doing it. It's just these demons. So remember, this was the time in which demons and evil spirits, they were talked about very often, and it was like a talk of every house. And people knew who these demons would be, and the fact that these sorcerers and these people who believed in witchcraft, they were there in the society. And whenever such an instance would happen, they would be called, and if the person got cured, they would say, well, look at this person, he's the sorcerer, he's the chief magician who has made him come back. So, but of course, there was no such magician, no such sorcerer in his times who could make the dead come back to life. Now, this was something very huge. And they had to make this, they had to belittle it. They had to relegate it. They had to somehow convince the masses that it is not from God that he's doing it. So the excuse that they came up with was that actually it is the chief spirit of the demons who is doing it. It's not from God. So this was like something that they wanted to do to fool the masses who were continuously being influenced by these miracles worked by Jesus.
I see. So because they did not want to follow Jesus, they came up with this excuse. But then did they...
Not themselves. I mean, the thing was that the masses were being influenced in a huge way. I mean, when these miracles would happen, imagine a common man, how he would be, he would revere Jesus. So they wanted this public acceptance of Jesus, to do away with it somehow or the other. So the thing that they worked out was, well, it's not God who is giving these miracles to him. They are coming from an entirely different area.
I see. But we know that during the time of Moses, the magicians and magic and sorcery was at its peak. During the time of Jesus, it's heard that the medicine was at its peak, for that time. But was sorcery and magic was also still involved?
Oh yes, very much there. I mean, these are things which existed in the society of the Israelites. Yes, this is something which the Quran actually specifically mentions, that in the times of Solomon, ala mulki ahdi Sulaiman, ala mulki Sulaiman, yu'allimun an-nas as-sihr. They would teach people this magic and sorcery. So this was very much rampant in the Israelites, and for a very, very long time, they existed in their society.
Thank you very much. Sir, I just wanted to ask a question about the term Rasul. To my understanding, we have come to realize that what is Rasul, that Rasul is above Nabi from the study of the Holy Quran. And not from other sources, like the traditional understanding that it was a traditional understanding that Rasul is someone who is given a book, but we now realize that Quran has not used it in that sense. But sir, if we learn it from the Holy Quran, then how come that the Holy Quran is using exceptions here in ayat? You said that it's used in a general sense as well.
Right.
Then sir,
right. Okay, so you see, this is what linguistics is all about. So the study of language in which we are able to understand whether a particular word is used in the literal sense or in a term. This is what we need to understand, and a good appreciation of the language will always let you know whether a word is being used as a term or whether it is being used as a word in its own literal form. So look at the word wahi. So awha ila nahl, the Quran says that we revealed to the bee. Now, of course, here it is not the same wahi which is sent to prophets of God, because it would consist of words. For awha ila nahl would mean that we revealed to the bee, which means that we ordained in her nature that such and such things have to be done. So you see, on the one case, the word wahi is being used as a term to mean that the words of God were being transmitted, and right at another place, the same word is being used in a different sense. So it is by appreciating the text, the nature of the usage, and the occasion of the text itself, which tells us whether a particular word is being used as a term or whether it's used in its literal form. So here the word rusul, I mean, it's when it says that فَفَرِيقًا كَذَّبْتُمْ وَفَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ, that one of them would be killed and the other one would be put to death. Here, of course, what we know is that the Rasul, the envoys of God are being referred to, and not Rasul in the technical sense, because from other parts of the Quran we know, as the Quran says, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لِأَغْلِبَنَّ أَنَا وَرُسُلِي, that I and my Rasul are going to remain dominant. They cannot be killed in any way, at least during the time that they are doing their mission. So not only from this usage, but also from other parallel verses, we get to know that, I mean, the word Rasul here is not used in its term, the way it is used as a term.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Annie, you may ask your question now.
Thank you. So if you could just comment on the difference between Ruhul Qudus and angels, because it's, I think earlier you mentioned that it's Gabriel, but we hear in the Quran both the terms mentioned together in the same verse, like, in Surah Qadr it says تَنَزَّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ, and elsewhere, Ar-Ruhu wal-Malaik. So what is the difference, and what's the significance that every time it's a revelation that's being mentioned, it's the Ruh, and elsewhere it's the angel?
You see, Tanazzalul Malaikatu war Ruh, again the word, the various words which are used for Gabriel are more than one. So Ruhul Qudus is also used for Gabriel, and Ar-Ruh is also used for Gabriel. These are the same, I mean, they are synonymous, just that the fact that they are different words, but they connote the same person who is Gabriel. So in all such instances, the word Gabriel is, I mean, the angel Gabriel is used, and the reason that he is named like this is that he is the person, or he is the angel chosen to bring down God's directives. So we know from the Quran and also from other literature that various angels were given different tasks. So Raphael, and we have Michael, we have Gabriel, so all of them having certain different tasks. But to Gabriel, it seems, the special task of bringing down God's directives to prophets of God is mentioned. So that is why, he is mentioned as the archangel. He is the chief of angels. He's someone who heads the angels, and he is the one who brings down God's directives to prophets of God.
But in the context of revelation, it's the Ruh that's mentioned, and not an angel.
So a Ruh is actually Gabriel. Tanazzalul Malaikatu war Ruh. You see, the word is mentioned that angels along with a Ruh, they descend upon mankind. So angels, which means his companions, other angels, along with a Ruh, which is Gabriel himself.
So a Ruh and a Ruhul Qudus, the same thing, I understand. Yes. But is that synonymous with Malaika?
Though, Malaika is a general cadre. So it's like saying that there is a army and then there's a general. So there are soldiers and there is a person who is a brigadier or a general who leads them. So of course, Gabriel is also an angel, but he's the chief angel.
So in some exegesis, there is a distinction in that whenever Ruh is mentioned, it's a higher level of consciousness which descends in the form of a revelation, whereas angels are more functional beings, supporting with the running of the universe.
This is an interpretation which needs to be corroborated by some linguistic substantiation. It does not carry any water, it doesn't hold any grounds. The word Ar-Ruh, if you look this up in the Quran in parallel verses, you'll see that it is used for Gabriel. It's not used for any higher form of consciousness.
Okay, so second question was, So there's also some interpretation in the non-Islamics or the Jewish or the Christian traditions, which question if the Holy Spirit is paraclete, just going by the literal meaning of the word. So if you could comment on that.
So as I said, you see, this is, some of the Jewish commentators, they have a different interpretation of the word ruh. But you see, as far as the Quran is concerned, I would like you to take up this assignment and look at the usage of the word ruh at various instances in the Quran and Ruhul Qudus also. It will become evident from the context itself that basically the angel Gabriel is being used at all times, except one in Surah Bani Israel when it says, Yas'alunaka anir ruh qul ruhu min amri rabbi. So the word ruh is also used for wahi itself, for revelation itself. But this is evident from linguistic considerations and from the context itself in Surah Bani Israel, where this verse occurs. But if you make a list of this usage in other parts of the Quran, I think it will become evident to you, and it's a small assignment that you can take up.
So I will take up this assignment. I'll follow up on this. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Adil Qureshi, you may ask the question. This is the final question for this session, for this section of the discussion.
So when you said Fariqan Kazabtum for Fariqan Taqtulun, and you said that does not mean that they killed or murdered the Rasul, because the Rasul cannot be murdered. Who did they actually murder if they were not the Rasul?
They murdered prophets. The word Rasul is now used as a term, as an envoy of God. For example, they killed Zachariah, they killed John. These are two very prominent examples. They were both father and son. They were put to death. But they were not Rasul, they were prophets. So the word Rasul is used as an envoy of God. Okay, so let's continue with the next, which is, these are verses 91 and 92. Okay, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا نُؤْمِنُ بِمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْنَا وَيَكْفُرُونَ بِمَا وَرَاءَهُ. This is something very important to note if you would like to know Jewish history and the Jewish mindset, which is mentioned repeatedly in the Quran. So, and these people are the ones that when it is emphasized upon them, believe in what God has revealed. Now, what does this mean? It actually means believe in the Quran, which is now being revealed to you. What would be their reply? Their reply would be, we only believe in what is revealed to us. Unzila alayna, what is revealed to us. وَيَكْفُرُونَ بِمَا وَرَاءَهُ. And in this manner, they would openly deny what is besides it. So, now you can see how the Quran has made a case out of this, that earlier on it is said that they were the people who were waiting for this book of God, and when it arrived, they did not accept it. And the reason being their own preference for their own progeny. They wanted the book to belong to their own progeny, to the Israelites. But when they saw that the book has arrived to their cousin, or the cousin branch, which was the Ishmaelites, so it was Baghyam, which means rebellion, and this sense of being deprived of that blessing that made them so angry. So now it says that if this is the case, وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ, it says that even though it alone is the truth and exact confirmation of the predictions that are with them. And look, make a note of how important this is. It says that first they would say that we will only believe what is revealed to us, which is the Torah. We will not believe in the Quran, which is now, brought down by the Prophet himself. And the thing is, وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ. They knew it was the truth, and it was in confirmation of what was before them, referring to the fact that it was basically the predictions which were found in the Torah regarding the advent of the last prophet in his book. So, مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ means that alone is the truth in exact confirmation of the predictions that are with them. And then it says, قُلْ فَلِمَ تَقْتُلُونَ أَنْبِيَاءَ اللَّهِ مِنْ قَبْلُ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Ask them, if you are believers of the guidance which has been revealed to you, why have you been killing those prophets of God who came to you before this? Again referring to the killings of Zachariah and to John. So, I mean, if you say that we will only believe in what is revealed to us, then it should have been the fact that you believe in what has been revealed to you. And prophets of God like Zechariah and John, who had come with the same message, why would you kill them? So, and the Quran in a very strong way, in fact, a very, I would say, emphatic way, it says, فَلِمَ تَقْتُلُونَ أَنْبِيَاءَ. If you think that you are believing in whatever has been revealed to you, then these prophets are from among the same chain. So why is it that you have ended up killing them? فَلِمَ تَقْتُلُونَ أَنْبِيَاءَ اللَّهِ مِنْ قَبْلِ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That ask then, if you are believers of the guidance which has been revealed to you, why have you been killing those prophets of God who came to you before this? And then وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ ثُمَّ اتَّخَذْتُمُ الْعِجْلَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ وَأَنْتُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. So you see, once again, the issue of the calf worship, once again the issue of the fact that they were guilty of this has been brought up. So at times the Quran works in a cyclic way, something which has already been mentioned. I mean, we see that calf worship was taken up some verses ago. But the nature of this crime is so heinous that it has now once again been brought up. It says that وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ, and it says that in reality Moses came to you with clear signs. Then in his absence you deified the calf, you made it your deity, and at the time you were committing a great injustice. So this is something we know very clearly when the Quran says bil-bayyinat, that just like Jesus, remember Moses was also given the miracles. I mean, the Quran speaks of 2, it says that there were 9 miracles, but it does not detail out 7 others. It says that the miracle of the white hand and the miracle of the staff turning into a snake, these are the 2 miracles which the Quran has referred to in detail. But the other 7 miracles, it says tisraya, these are the 9 signs referring to the fact that you look at the Torah. So if you go to the Torah, you'll find those 7 other signs being mentioned here again. So once again, the stress is that another prophet came to you before Jesus, and it was Moses, and he came with his own signs, and you were guilty enough to deny him as well. So the important thing that has to be realized here is that as far as this discussion is concerned, that they were the people from whom the promise was taken, and then instead of honoring this promise, they continued to say that we are just going to believe in what is believed. I mean, what is revealed to us. So the Quran just takes this counter question to another limit, and to another level. It says, well, okay, accepted. You are only going to believe what was revealed to you. But if that was the case, then why did you kill your own prophets? Because they were standard bearers of the same message. So you see, I mean, it's like a question upon question, a chart sheet upon another chart sheet, which is being presented to them. And then it says, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ وَرَفَعْنَا فَوْقَكُمُ الطُّورَ خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاسْمَعُوا قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا وَأُشْرِبُوا فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْعِجْلَ بِكُفْرِهِمْ قُلْ بِئْسَ مَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِهِ إِيمَانُكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And recall when we took a promise from you, and for this raised Tur or Sinai, Tur is Mount Sinai, above you, and commanded. So you see, once again, recollect this word Misaq. It's once again brought to the fore. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ. Remember, when the Torah was being given to you, the Mount of Sinai was raised above you. It was in a situation as if it was an earthquake which had struck them, and as if to make them overawed by the fact that this is the God in whose presence and whose radiance and manifestation of power you are being given this book. And the words are خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاسْمَعُوا. So grasp firmly whatever we have given you and listen and obey. And this is what they were told, that whatever this book is being given to you, is whatever it says, you have to believe. But look what they did. قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. They said, we heard and we disobeyed. So this is basically something which they did from their deeds, from their action. From the words, from their tongues, they said, Sami'na, okay, we have listened. And from their deeds, instead of following what they'd listened, they said, Asaina, we are disobedient. So this is a very beautiful, literary structure in the Quran, in which you'll find that something is being mentioned and then its consequence is being mentioned in a very subtle and sarcastic way, that yes, you said that I'm going to listen, But what did you do? Your own attitude was that you denied it. So sami'na wa asayna. So the parallel words which occur in the Quran, which I'm sure many students of the Quran like you would remember, is sami'na wa ata'na, which says we listened and we obeyed. But look what it has said here. It says sami'na wa asayna. Asayna is the opposite of ata'na. Ata'na is to obey and asayna is to disobey. So it was said that we listen and when we obey. I mean, this was what was said earlier. But now what has been said is that we listened and now we disobeyed. Referring to the fact that how evil you are, that when you listen to something and you openly end up denying it and not following it. And then what happened is ushribu fi qulubil ijla, which means that, and because of this disbelief of theirs, that calf was made to dwell in their hearts. That calf was made to dwell in their hearts. Ask them, if you are believers, then what evil are these things to which this faith of yours prompts you? So for ushribu fi qulubihim al-ujla once again refers to the fact that as far as these people are concerned, as far as their way of acknowledging the truth is concerned, this is far, far from what righteousness and truth is. You were given this Torah and you once again were told that khuzu ma atainakum, you hold steadfast to it, grasp it strongly. And what did you do? You said, okay, we listened to it, but then you denied it. Your actions and your deeds bespoke of the fact that you never followed what you said. And of course, this incident of calf worship was then brought up once again. And let's now move on to the next part before these questions can be invited once again. It says, قل إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة عند الله خالصة من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولن يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. Again, that fury and that wrath and that distasteful sorrow is so apparent from these words. It says, tell them. I mean, it's simply like God shouting out to them. Tell them. In kanat lakum ad-darul akhiratu indallah. If to God the abode of the hereafter is for yourselves alone, leaving all others aside, then be desirous of death if you are true in this claim of yours. And you will see they shall never wish for it owing to the earning of their hands, which they have sent forward. And in reality, God is fully aware of these unjust people. So you see, the fact that they were the chosen people, this is something which the Quran has expressed repeatedly. The Torah has also referred to that they thought that because of the fact that they are chosen, and remember this selection or this choice, what does it mean? They were not chosen because they were superior in any way, or they were, a superior race because of being Abraham's progeny. They were chosen for a responsibility. So it's not that they were chosen because of some superiority. The word chosen actually refers to the fact that you were chosen for a task. So the task part got subtracted and the chosen part remained in their mind, that we are chosen people, we are God's favorite. Nahnu abnaullahi wa ahibba'uhu, that we are sons of God and we are His chosen ones, is what the Quran says elsewhere. So they said that, well, we are God's chosen people, and to us, the abode of the hereafter is going to be, remember we said earlier on, it says, لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ, that the fire shall not touch us except for a few days. And the Quran comments, well, if that is the case, that you are chosen people, then in kanat lakum ad-darul akhiratu, then why don't you desire of death? Because if this is the case, then death is something which is going to be always in front of you. It is going to be there, and you will always ask the fact that, well, okay, if we are the chosen people, we gladly accept death. But the fact is that they are wary of death. They are super scared of dying. And you'll find that in the next section as we go along. But before we enter that section, we have 5 or 4 minutes left for this. So I will not go ahead, and let us confine ourselves to the questions to what we have just discussed.
Dr. Shehzad, just quickly, what's the difference between Tur versus Jabal? Because Quran sometimes uses Tur and sometimes it uses Jabal.
So Jabal means mountain and Tur is Sinai, the Mount of Sinai. So it's just like, referring to the fact when the word mountain is used, it's like, being so clear that the mountain which is being referred to is Sinai, that at times the Quran doesn't take the name of that mountain. So it's just saying the mountain and then taking the name of that mountain elsewhere.
So Tur Sina is the full name, and Quran.
Yeah, right. So the Tur Sina is the mount which lied or which existed in the valley of Sinai, and that is why that Jabal is also called the Mount of Sinai.
Sir, Qalu Samena wa Asaina, a simple translation would have been said we hear and we disobey, but you took a lot of liberty in translating it, that they actually did not say that. What is the reason for this?
So it says that we have given you and listen and obey. So the attitude before your forefathers adopted clearly showed that at that very time also they had said, we heard and we disobeyed. So I was referring to the fact that earlier on they would say that we listen and obey. Remember, this is why I said that the words that they actually said was Samirna wa Ata'na, which means we heard and we follow. This is what they had said, but their deeds belied what they claimed, which means that actually they ended up disobeying that. So the word Asaina is actually just telling, like a comment telling us that, well, they had said Atana, they had said we'd follow, we'd comply, but they in fact did not say this with their heart. What they actually said was that we have heard and we will disobey. So it's like the Quran telling them that when you had made that commitment that we will obey, even at that time, what you had in your heart and which your deeds subsequently showed was that yes, we have heard what you said, but we are not going to follow that. So that is why this has been pointed out here. So as I said, that it says that.
So Samena wa Ata'na is the reason why this has been translated like this. If they had not said that.
Because this is, as you can see, Ustaz Ghamidi has put this in brackets, that the attitude which your forefathers adopted clearly showed that at that very time, in fact, they had said, we had heard and disobeyed. So, referring to an earlier incident, because this is not what they did, it was what their forefathers did. The forefathers had said, whatever you say is we clearly hear that, and inshallah we'll go to follow it. But the Quran says that in fact, what you said as a commitment that you'll follow it was never a commitment in your heart. You just said it with your tongues that you'll obey it. In your own heart, the fact was that you'll say we'll disobey it.